Following on from our last YouTube film where we were rolling down sheet, today we're going to be looking at rolling down some square wire, rectangular wire and D-section wire from this ingot that we have just poured. My name's Andrew Berry and welcome to At the Benches YouTube channel. When it comes to pouring ingots, you can pour an ingot into like a flat sheet, or you can pour an ingot into like a rectangular rod. I'll post the video by here if you want to go and check it out when we roll down the sheet. And in this film, we've got a piece of silver here. This is around about an ounce of silver. And we've used the electronic furnace again to do this, and we've poured out this little ingot. Now, there are several molds that you can use for pouring out ingots. You can use the adjustable ingot molds. You can see we've got this one here. This is where we did the sheet, and you can make narrow sheet, wide sheet. You can also turn it around into this direction here, and we can make some round wire. We can also turn it around this way, and we can make D-section wire. That's one option. The other option is using this type of ingot mold here. It did have a handle on here, but it snapped off because I've dropped it a couple of times. It's got different size grooves, narrow one, fairly wideish one, and on the other side, a nice wide section. Great for pouring ingots. And this other mold here from a guy by the name of Hans Mevis. This is a good adjustable mold here. You can do it into 5mm, 8mm in width. There's also a little stop that goes in here, and there's divisions that shows you 10 grams, 20 grams, 30 grams, and so forth. And I've used this to produce this ingot. Now you can see this isn't quite right, because when you pour an ingot, you usually sort of pour it right in the center of the mold, and it flows to either side. Now, when the metal cools, it cools obviously. The last bit that goes into the mold is the coldest, and this is what has happened here. You can see I've poured it into the middle, and the metal has flowed this way, and it has flowed this way, and it's left this, again, this little crusty bit. Exactly the same happened when we poured our flat sheet. That top section had a bit of a crusty bit. That's the last bit that goes into the mold, and it's normally perhaps the dirtiest, or it could well be the coldest, and the metal is starting to solidify. This is the problem we've got with this ingot here. I could have poured it up at this end here and let the metal flow along the ingot mold. Depends on how much metal you're pouring. You're pouring a small little 10 gram, 20 gram little ingot, that method is fine, but perhaps by pouring the metal in from this end here and having it to travel molten all this way to the end here may be too much for it, and you may find that the metal may solidify on its travels to the end of the mold. We can get around that by heating the mold up to make sure that the ingot mold is nice and hot. There is that way about it, but I just want to show you the problems that we may have in this situation, because in the center by here the metal hasn't flowed properly. You're going to get a nice roll. I admit you may find there'll be a little bit of a cracking perhaps in the center where this area is, but we should get a lovely roll. Now, if you want to make loads and loads and loads and lots of wire, I would perhaps do it in 20 gram sections, so we don't have to have this much of an ingot to roll down with perhaps these little crusty bits. I call these crusty bits because they are like a bit of crust. Or I would get the mold really hot and pour it from one end and pour it along. If you use these adjustable molds where you pour the metal in from one end and pour it down, great, you're not going to have this particular problem, but I think the majority of the adjustable molds you get are not made for square wire. They're always made for round wire or flat wire. I could be mistaken. If I am, please let me know in the comment section down below. So let's sort this one out first of all. We're going to get rid of these little nasty little crusty bits off the end, these little scaggy bits, because if there's any scaggy bits sticking up, they're going to be pushed down into the metal as we roll it out. So first of all, let's remove these little scaggy bits first of all. The top of the surface here is fairly smooth, but remove that and we're going to carry on and show you how we're going to roll it down. Right then, so I've taken off that little bit of a crusty bit and I've filed that little section down. I could well have problems in the center of this as I roll it down, but we're going to have to see how we go. So exactly the same way as what we did with the flat sheet, and you haven't watched that already, click up by here. We're going to get the rolling mill. Now, if you want to roll down wire, it's always important obviously to get a rolling mill that enables you to roll down wire. We have got the V grooves on the half here. This is a Durston Agile 130, so it's 130 mil from one side to the other side there. These don't have extension rollers. We've got the D sections that would come on the ends here, built into the main part of the rollers here. But we've got a nice selection of V grooves on this side. V's on the top, V's on the bottom, going right down from, I would have thought, about 8 or 9 millimeters here, going right down to about 1.5 millimeter right down here. And we're going to use those grooves to enable us to roll down the ingot itself. So first of all, we're going to open up the rolls this way. These are the opposite way to the ones I have downstairs. And because if you look at the ingot, we've got the ingot is thin in the middle but thick on the ends. We're going to get these ends to go through first of all. So open them up until the ingot just goes through. Take it down. Now remember, in the previous film we were looking at taking the sheet down literally 1/4 of a turn. That's because the sheet was nice and wide. 1/8 of a turn, sorry, but that's because the sheet was really wide. Now we've got a small little area that we're rolling down. We can take this down 1/4 of a turn. So let's just pop that through. Let's just take that through and see how it goes. Goes through far too easily. Let's just take that down a little bit smaller, 1/4 of a turn, and let's try again. I can feel it going through, and it's going to be loose in the middle, obviously, because that's where the metal is the thinnest, and it'll come through, and it may just, it may feel a bit of resistance. But let's turn the metal now 90 degrees. Now, let me just carry on going through. All right, let's take this down another 1/4 of a turn. So what you must always remember to do is to put the ingot through in one direction, okay? In this direction, obviously goes vertical because of the V grooves. When it goes through, you always put this end in first. So if you want to mark it with a bit of Tipex or a bit of indelible marker on the end, this is the end that always gets put through first. Don't think about turning the ingot around and putting it through the other direction. Why? Well, going back to the sort of the molecular structure that I was talking about in the last film, is that put it through in one direction, the metal gets squashed, and perhaps it goes through, the metal gets squashed, perhaps from being vertical like this into this sort of angle like this. Okay, so the metal gets squashed this way. You turn it around the other way, so the metal is going through this direction. Oh, doesn't matter. Well, yeah, so the metal will be going through the opposite way, and the crystalline structure will be being forced in a different direction. Sometimes it will cause it to crack. So instead of this direction, it'll be going through, let me do this direction, this way, and because the molecular structure is sticking outwards, there's a chance it will crack. Okay, so always try and keep putting it through the same way. Once you've annealed it, you can then put it through whichever way you want to, but whichever way you start putting it through, after you've annealed it, keep putting it through that direction all the time. And once it comes through the rolling mill, take it out and then keep it in this plane all the way around, bring it around to the front of the mill, turn it 90 degrees and put it through again, okay? So put it through, keep it going through the mill this way, take it around, and then turn the ingot at 90 degrees. That way you will squash both ends, both edges of the ingot. I've taken it down 1/4 of a turn, let's put it through again. I can feel it, it's binding a little bit, it's a bit loose, take it round. So it's coming out, okay? It's coming out like this. We're going to take it around this side to put through, but then we need to turn it 90 degrees, 90 degrees, then we put it through again. We take it out, we keep it round, we turn it 90 degrees, we close the rolls another 1/4 of a turn, and we take it through. Comes out, 90 degrees, put it through. It does help if you've got a geared rolling mill as a gearage on the side of the machine like this. A gearbox, it really does help with rolling down. You can get away with a direct drive rolling mill using this because it's only a square section, it's not a huge wide piece. But we'll carry on taking it down, another quarter of a turn on the mills, taking it down, bringing it out, turning the ingot a quarter of a turn, putting it through. Quarter of a turn on the ingot, and so forth. And we keep on going down. I can feel it getting a little bit harder, but that is because we're having to start to roll the whole length of the ingot now, not just the beginning and not just the end. Take that down, quarter of a turn, put it through. So at the moment we've got a nice ingot being produced, a nice piece of chunky wire. The finish is looking really good because the rolls are really nice and highly polished. The area by here you can just about see it's not quite being rolled yet, but what we're getting here is a lovely, lovely finish. What you may find is that when you poured the ingot, if the surface was slightly undulating, you may find you may get some marking on the ingot itself. You can see this little area by here that we've got a little bit that hasn't quite been rolled yet. We may find we may get some marks on the surface. We can get rid of that quite easily. When we've rolled it down, it's just to file it away slightly to go back to nice and fresh, clean, smooth metal. Likewise over this side as well. You can just about see these areas by here. The rest of it is looking really good. So we're going to carry on taking it down. How far do we need to take it down? As far as you actually need the wire. Now obviously the metal becomes work hardened, so after a short while, once you feel it's getting a little bit harder to turn, stop, anneal the metal, heat it up to a very, very dull red all the way through it, and then let it air cool or put it in some safety pickle to get all some oxides off, and you can carry on taking it down through the mill to whatever size of wire you require. So it's starting to get a little bit awkward now. It's getting a little bit harder to turn the wheel. I'm taking it down the quarter turn every single time. And it's just starting to get a little bit more effort. So what I'm going to do now is anneal it. It's looking really nice now. We've got a bit of a curl coming on it, but that's fine with the wire because we can correct that because we turn it around 90 degrees. Or if you find it's curling a bit further to one direction, turn it over 180 degrees and put it through again. So that's looking really good. We're going to anneal this now to relax those molecules because they've become really, really tense because we put a lot of stress and strain on them by compressing them. Heat it up, release those molecules, they become, nice, nice and soft, ready to be crushed again by taking it back to the roller mill. Give me 2 seconds, let's anneal it. So, using a little handheld torch, we can heat this up. It's always best if you can do this in a bit of a quiet corner, a little dark corner where there are no bright lights on this. And you can get a better indication of how the metal actually looks. Keep playing the flame up and down, up and down. But once you go it to the right temperature, you can pull the flame away a bit just so that you don't necessarily overheat and put too much colour in the metal. So you can just about see when we pass the flame over, we got that little bit of colour coming on it now. I know when the flame's on it, it's fairly red, but as soon as the flame comes off it, it goes black. But what I'm looking for is when the flame comes off the piece, it still glows a slight dull red. But once we've got that dull red there, we're going to wait a few seconds and keep it at that sort of temperature to make sure that the metal has been completely annealed all the way through. And just as the torch comes off it, it's got a bit of a faint glow to it. pull the flame back. It's a little bit cooler the further back you go. Keep at that sort of heat for a few seconds. Nice. Wait for that to cool. We have now filed the surface of the ingot. This little area by here, I think is going to cause us some problems. There's a little bit of cracking developing in this area. It's exactly what I thought would happen. Just to show you basically the ways around things and show you that even things like this can happen to professionals. I've been doing this for 30 odd years. Perhaps I should have poured it down at the one end and let it go through. Just want to show you the fact that you may be able to salvage the ingot by filing it down to just past those cracks, but we'll see how we go. The rest of the ingot's looking really, really cool. Now, a good rule of thumb, once we've taken this down until it's a nice even thickness all the way along, a good rule of thumb is that how long is this piece of metal going to be? Seems a very strange question, I know. So for argument's sake, if this metal now was 6 millimeters square and we wanted to make a piece of square section wire that was 3 millimeters square, that piece of 3 millimeter square wire will be 4 times as long as the metal we've got here. Okay, 6 millimeters. We want to take it down to half that thickness. The metal will be 4 times as long. You're not necessarily taking the thickness down in half, you're taking it down in half this way and half that way, so it ends up to be 4 times as long if you take it down by half. Let's just carry on a little bit further. So we are down to pretty much the sort of size that we need. A nice thick piece of wire. Now it depends now what you want to do with the wire. You may want to desection the wire. You may want to flatten the wire and make it rectangular. Now when we come to make this smaller square section in all directions, the metal will get smaller in all directions. Now, if for argument's sake you've got this piece of wire here and this measurement across here is 6 millimeters and you want to reduce the depth, so it's not 6 millimeters square, you want to make a piece of rectangular section 6 millimeters by 3 millimeters deep. Yes, you would then get your piece of metal and you would put it through these parts of the rolls. If it gets open, there we go. Okay, so then you would then take it through the rolls and you would take your piece of metal that is 6 millimeters wide down to 3 millimeters. Now remember, when you squash something in this direction, it not only squashes it in this direction, it'll slightly get wider as well. So your piece of 6 millimeters width that is now 3 millimeters deep will be perhaps 6.5 millimeters or even 7 millimeters wide. So what you have to do is to allow for that. So say you want to be your bit of metal of 6 mil by 3 mil, take it down through the square rolls until it's round about 5.25, 5 millimeters square. Then you take it down through the flat rolls, and as it flattens down to 3 mil, it'll widen as well. Make sense? The same also applies to the D-section as well. So if you wanted to produce a piece of 6 millimeter width D-section wire, you'd actually make the wire 5 millimeters or 5.25 millimeters wide, because as you squash the metal down, it will expand this way as well. Always bear that in mind. At the moment, we're going to carry on going down. It's exactly the same width as the D-section wire, but we're going to take it down a little bit further. And I'll show you what's happening now to that center section. We're going down to a nice thickness, and if you have a look really closely, you may be able to see a crack developing right where I thought we were going to get a crack, right in the section here. Now you may be able to file that and to file down slightly below that crack, carry on rolling it out. You may find that you'll get the crack out. Sometimes that crack will always be there and you'll never be able to get it out. So try and file it, take it down to below, carry on rolling it square. If you can, if you have to have metal that is this particular thickness, well then I'm afraid you've had it. You're going to have to cut across that crack and settle for a shorter piece of wire. So we've gone down now. Let me just measure this a second. This metal now is 5.9 millimeters square. The size of the D section we've got in here is, I think it's about 5 millimeters. Let me just double check. I don't know off the top of my head. Looks like 5 millimeters. There's no way we're going to be able to D-section this wire using these particular types of rolls. We can flatten it and make some rectangular section if you wanted to. Let's just carry on going down to make some wire. And you can see as we're rolling it, as the metal is getting narrower, it's also getting a lot longer. Right, let's anneal this again. It's getting a little bit hard. We're going to cut across the crack here because I'm sure this is not going to come out. Then we can work with then 2 pieces of wire. I've sawn the long ingot now in half, right where that nasty crack was. So I've got a nice rectangular section here. I've also rolled down the other part of the wire, and you can see now this is getting longer as well. It was a fraction shorter than this piece, and you can see now by taking this down, we've doubled the length on what we've got. And the plan is, I've taken this down now to 3.5 millimeters. And I'm going to show you what I just explained. If I D-section this piece of wire, it's going to get slightly, obviously, thinner, but it's also going to spread as well. And that's what I'm going to do now. And we're going to be using these D-sections on the top roller as we've got on this particular mill here. If you had a rolling mill with extension rollers, you would find them on the outside of the casing over here. Now this is the advantage that you've got if you can get a rolling mill with these types of features. We have the V grooves on this side that we've used to do the square wire. We have now used, we're going to use these D sections. Now this is 3.5 millimeters in width. For instance, say you want to produce a 4 millimeter width D-section ring strip. Have a look at the D-sections on this side here. You don't want to go for a D-section where this bit of wire just fits. Now this one here, I'm just showing you on the top here, just about fits into this groove here. You may think, well, that's what I want, that's what I'm going to use. But if you do that, as the metal squashes this way, it'll squash outwards this way, and you're going to get marks because it's going to go wider than the actual rolls themselves. So always put your piece of metal in the next size up. I want this to be 4 millimeters in width. It's 3.5 millimeters. I want it to spread out 0.5 millimeter. I could come straight along and use these rolls, the bigger ones over here, but the problem is, if I can just take these down, you'll be able to see what I mean here. The wider you become, the wider these rolls become, the deeper they become. So obviously there's some sort of trade-off between width and depth. So we've got this here, this is 3.5 millimeter. This looks in the region of about 4.5 millimeter for this one here. Very hard to see exactly because my slide gauge doesn't quite fit. Yeah, 4.5 millimeters is the next one along. So that's what I'm going to be putting this piece of 3.5 millimeter square wire through. Now, have a look at the surface. Because the D section is going to go on the outside of the ring, and because this is a bit of metal we've melted down ourselves, we're going to look for the best surface. Have a look closely at the metal. See which one of the 4 sides is the best. the best without any marks, the best without any cracks, without any imperfections. Choose the best side, because that is going to go on the outside, and that's basically the side that is going to be noticed the most. Place the worst side, perhaps you may have some little marks within the piece, put that on the bottom. That's going to go on the inside of the ring, where you could sort of get away with it, so to speak. So let's have a look and see which side of this is going to be the best. I think that side there is looking pretty good. So we're going to take it up, not in the 3.5mm, the 4.5mm. I'm not saying that the piece will become 4.5mm, but we're going to be using that because it's going to allow the metal to spread. I wouldn't necessarily take this down into rectangular section to put through the D-sections, because we want to make sure that that D-section is even all the way around, and you can only really do that if you use the square wire. So let's put it through. Again, we're going to open up these rolls. I keep remembering to turn it the opposite way than when I got downstairs, and take the metal through. Keep it nice and straight. It'll come through to this side. That's one pass. That's looking really nice. Take this down a quarter of a turn, put it in, do exactly the same. The metal will always center itself because of the D section. Put it through again. What you find is it comes out the other side, it's going to be curling. It's going to be curling, as you can see. You can stop that happening by grabbing it on the other side and guiding it straight out. So don't let it bend, just let it, and just try and pull it straight the way out as best you can. So that little section there I pulled out is nice and straight. That bit isn't. So let's have a look and see what width we're looking at now. Come along onto my gauges here. That was 3.5mm. It is now 3.93. So as you can see, 3.5mm was our original. It is now coming up to 4mm in width. And we can carry on taking it down until we get to 4mm. There you are, 4.04. The depth on this now is 2.37, so 2.4mm. You can go a little bit further if you wanted to. That'll come out, and that has now produced, albeit slightly bendy because we didn't guide it as it came out, a nice D-section piece of wire that we're going to be able to use 4mm, 4.04mm, so it's pretty spot on. We reduced the thickness by, it was 3.5, it's down to 2.2, so we've reduced the thickness by about 1mm, and it spread that 0.5mm. So always start off with a piece of wire slightly narrower, about 0.5mm narrower than what you need for the final ring to be exactly the right width. So there we go, D-section wire. One little tip I'm going to show you now. Say you want to make some quart section wire. So quart section is where it's nicely rounded on the outside, and it's also slightly rounded on the inside, so it slides onto the finger quite nicely. What you can always do is put this piece of metal back through the D-sections that we've just passed it through, but instead of having it going through in the D-section on the top, turn it upside down. So now the flat section of this wire is facing up, and the D-section is facing downwards. That is now going to impart a bit of a curve on the outside that was originally going to be the inside. So if you see there, we've got the D-section, round section on the bottom, flat on the top. We can put that through what we just were putting the wire through. And that comes through, and that means now we've got a nice rounded top here, but we've also got the edges on this part of the wire slightly taken off as well. I'll go down a little bit more with this because depending on the thickness that you want, you may end up with a little bit of a flat top. Let's pass that back through. So that's the wire. Gorgeous, gorgeous round top on the wire, and on the underside the edges have been taken off. Sure, we can file a D-section, we can file the inside edges of the ring once we've made it, but you're going to be losing metal. This is a way of shaping the metal, just rounding off the inside of that bit of metal to make it more of a quart section. So that's how we can sort out and use the rolling mill to make D-section wire, quart shaped wire, square section wire, and also we can put that through the flats to make rectangular section wire. Now there's one other section that we haven't really touched so far, and that is round section. Durston do make a rolling mill with these D-section grooves running across the whole top and across the whole bottom that enables us to roll round wire, but you have to dedicate the rolling mill to simply doing that, and for me that's completely cost-wise out of the question. So we're going to be using some draw plates, but to get the wire to the required size to be able to use the draw plates, we're going to be using these V grooves on this side, and we're going to be covering that in our next film. So don't forget, we can melt down a lovely ingot, we can make some gorgeous, gorgeous flat sheet using this particular type of rolling mill. We can make some gorgeous square section, rectangular section, making some D-section wire, and also my little trick to make quart section wire. So please, if you haven't subscribed already, I'd love you to. Please smash that little bell icon if that's something that you're into, to be notified when films go live on our YouTube channel. Don't forget, please give this film thumbs up if you like it. Please share it with your friends, and until the next film where we're going to turn this square section wire into round wire, my name is Andrew Berry for At The Benches YouTube channel. Take care, see you next time. Bye bye.